look at the surveys. I don't remember who broke down into the different groups. Bob was the one who broke off with the equity definition group. So I think, Julie, were you with that group?
I was with you. I think both Julie and I
Okay.
were with you, and then Kristen was with us. I think that was the four of us.
Okay, that's
And
right.
Dave, you were in that one too, right?
So
Yes,
that,
Keenan and I were in the other group that we were talking about, the definition.
so had you either of you have an opportunity to think about how would we should move forward with that? Or is it something that we should take a look at putting some things together and putting it into the equity folder and then work from that draft form? Or what would be your thoughts on how to go about doing that?
Yeah, I think that is the best idea, to kind of put out those statements, those concepts of our definition, and have people kind of come in and tweak and add to it and build on it that way. I think that's really the best way.
So is everybody able to access that folder? Keenan, I know there was an issue with you getting some of the information, but do you freely access it now?
I'm not completely sure. Do you know, did you share it with my school email or my personal email?
So Keenan, that's the folder that I shared with you, I believe. I shared it with your school email, I think. I think you had said you were able to get in there. So double check.
Okay, I'll go double check.
Because I think I was just looking in that folder just to refresh my memory, and I think it was the name of the folder. So if you go and you're shared with me, it says Equity Committee. It's a folder. Let me see if I. I'm looking now.
I found it. I've got it.
Okay. Actually, yeah, I shared it with your school. Okay.
I know that Julie, I think maybe it was you who said they're starting to get quite a bit of information that's collected there, and it might be a good thing to sort of put subfolders in there inside that main folder. One of the things that I'm having difficulty with is just a little bit of technology. I still have to work that one out. I don't see anything that other people have added to the folder yet. I tried to download something on my computer that would allow me to access the Google Drive completely, but I'm only really seeing what I have put in there. So if there's somebody who has access to it and wants to go through and sort of organize what's there, I'd be happy to do it, but I don't know that working from this particular computer, I don't know how effective I will be until I get those issues of access completely ironed out.
Julie, do you want the two of us work on that together?
Yeah, that sounds good. Absolutely. Kind of separate it out into a few different subfolders just to kind of organize it. Absolutely.
We'll sort it out, and then if people have different thoughts about what to name the folders or how to categorize them, but we can probably, I would think, maybe some resources, maybe obviously survey information.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What are some other topics? Probably the state mission, the kind of our statement.
Yep. And I think the examples of the policy from the state that they have some policy examples that they put in there, those 3 folders.
So a policy folder.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, basic communication, I think there's some of the minutes and notes that are in there that we could keep divided out for people who wanted to see those. I think for me, I'm just trying to see like our steps, um, as far as what steps we're taking to build this policy. Just kind of like I haven't been on a whole lot of committees, so I'm just like seeing the vision for tonight and then seeing the vision long term. What steps we're taking to build the policy, what everyone's kind of envisioning. I just wanted to get like some feedback because I'm kind of new to this whole policy committee thing.
We don't have a draft yet of any statement, correct?
Not from this no, not from this committee, not from,
But we have some sample policies.
right.
So would that be the next step, that we would want to start to draft a statement based on so far of our kind of learnings and conversations, or?
Well, that was my thought, to take a look at whether we wanted to have something, the definition of equity, I think, is the basis for that policy start discussion, those discussions. So what is it that we are defining as equity? And then what steps are we going to put into place for resources and whatever to make sure that the outcomes that we would be looking for in that definition would be in place for Salem students. So that would be how my head would work through that. But if I'm open to anybody else's, my experience with policy has been, you have a particular issue, you're looking for how you would like that issue to be handled, and then the policy that drives the language in the policy.
So I did, I think some of them, I'm just hopping back in the folder just to review it, but I think, so basically kind of our statement in terms of how we define equity and see equity as a district, then our goals, and then how we support those goals. Would that be?
That for me, I think sometimes you see policies and they're just very brief and they just are a statement, like an overarching statement about how you want to go. As I see policies evolving, many of the policies now not only have that, but they have the administrative part of it too, have the nuts and bolts of how some of that's going to go forward. I do think that in this particular instance, the more that we're able to share with what we want to look for as far as outcomes, I think the better formed will be as far as we move forward. So, but that's a personal position on my part. So I'm open to however people want to move forward.
Yeah, one last thought I have, and then I feel like I'm talking a lot, but is making sure how we define what those supports would be, but not to box us in too tightly, right? Like, so or else we'd have to be changing it a lot. Like, so having it be a general, providing resources or something like, just a general statement of support, as opposed to a lot of specifics, I guess.
Right. So, Dr. Glover, have you had any thoughts about how to move forward on that?
I think the group, particularly in the past few weeks, has had a lot of ideas of equity and what it is. And I think that first idea of being able to get everyone's thoughts in one spot so we can look at it, I think is important. That way we have concretely in front of us, this is where, from the group, where everyone's ideas of what equity means. And there's a couple ways to do that. And I think, again, actually going back to my teacher roots a little bit, and a little bit of, this is what equity is, this is what equity is not. So you have that list of comparatives of, this is what what I think individually, Dave Glover, is equity, but these are the things equity is not, is not equity in terms of a definition. And then because sometimes to help kind of define the concept, which is what we're really looking to do here. I don't think we're looking to define the word equity. We're trying to define that concept for us, right? So in order to do that, you have to have some type of boundary around it. And to do that, if you can define what it's not to us, that helps us center the idea of this is what equity is for Salem. And then within that, this is our broad definition of it. And then, and to your point of, if this is our broad definition, these are the types of things we want to say in a policy type statement to be able to support that with the support, the expectation, the resources, and so on into there. The similarly, but a little different, is more of a comparative with equality, because the two are similar, but they're different. Just to kind of sharpen what we think that definition might be. It's also a little more concrete, because sometimes folks have a hard time with define. We can define this is what I think this is, but it's not this. That can be hard for some folks. Whereas if I think equity is this, equality means this. It gets to the same path, but it's just a little more concrete.
I like that. And I'm thinking about if we were, kind of traditionally all together in the same room, I envision we'd have out the big poster paper and kind of do like a little around the world, and we'd each go and add some ideas to the paper. Kind of read what other people are writing and add it in, or have small group conversations and merge them together. I think that's the next step. I agree.
Here's, you can set up a Google Doc, just figure out whatever the magic words let Ann play are, and then to be able to set up the T chart type of a chart and say equity is not, and then everyone can just edit that document, and at the next meeting you go through, okay, this is what we think equity is, and then find where those common words are that everyone put into place, and then use those words to come up with that definition.
Yeah. So should we think up a little bit about what kind of those 2 or 3 statements are that we want to kind of delve into a little more? So I think obviously what is equity and what it is not, and then equity versus equality. I don't know how we kind of tease that out.
I would stick with 2. I really would. If we're going to do the kind of the more abstract version of it, equity is this, equity is not this, I would just stick with that, because then that focuses that concept of equity. Then the next step would be, well, how does this compare against equality?
And do we think, so because obviously we have a few people who aren't here tonight, so when we're communicating that out, is it just what is equity in general, or how do we see equity in our sense of what, for our purposes in the community, I don't know.
I think that's open for discussion. I know from, if this were my social studies classroom, I would start with a bigger topic. Here's the broad piece, what equity is, and then we have some type of definition, and then I would start to narrow it down to more specifics.
Right.
So
we could look at it broadly and then say, now when we're thinking through in our Salem CSD lens, does this change at all?
Because what will start to happen is we start to compare it to situations and circumstances at Salem Washington Academy that will start to give us our values and beliefs about equity. That would also give us our value statements about equity, and also help with those other pieces about planning and goals and policy statements.
But when we look at it broadly, in that broad sense, it challenges us not to use our personal lens and look at it as a broader.
Just to understand what the big idea of equity is, again, the big concept, and then as we narrow it down, it will naturally come into what it means to us. And then that we'll be able to pull some things out of that as we go along.
Is like, okay, so Anne put in the examples from the state. So do you end up kind of funneling that into using it as a scaffolding, as an example, and then we follow that as our scaffolding, our part of definition, what our mission statement is or what our value statements are, and then kind of go into bigger details on the plan.
Right.
Is that kind of stuff using the New York State document as kind of a scaffold for us?
Well, I think then the next step we would say, then what are our goals based on kind of that lens of our definition of equity and how we see it for Salem, right? Then that would be our next steps, is then what are our goals? Like, are we there? I guess maybe that's the next question is, where are we in that true sense? And then, because are you talking about, Julie, how in those they have like the definitions, then they have goals, then they have how are we going to get there, or belief statements and different things. So we probably have to work through each one of those, whatever we want to include. And then, as Ann said, is it going to be a brief statement or a, 3-pager?
Absolutely. Exactly the way you were saying, Julie. I'm kind of like envisioning that, like the state being a scaffold for us. I mean, they have a pretty, if you look over those samples, that's pretty, detailed. I don't think it's going to be like it goes into the definitions of the different terms that they're using, kind of the plan part, and are the outcomes, if we do a survey, do the outcomes kind of drive our plan? Is that where that survey would come into play, where we would see that survey and then kind of hand pick we'll see those outcomes and then hand pick our plan from those, maybe things that we need to emphasize. And just kind of getting a scaffolding of wording and just where we would fit. I love the discussion, generating it from us, not necessarily generating it from the state, but kind of using that as kind of scaffolding to see where our statements will come into place, where our definition will come into place, because really it's kind of a new policy. Although we have the code of conduct, I think the equity piece is kind of a new policy, that it would be good to have the definitions. It would be good to have a more detailed policy, if that makes sense, instead of more of a blanket one, but one that kind of educates people about equity, having the educating piece and also the policy piece and also a plan piece, because I think people are trying to be educated in this area as well. We're all on a different spectrum as to where we personally fall in that and how we want to make change in our community, our school, individually. I don't know if that makes sense.
Actually, it does, because we decide to do it in both ways. We can have that broad statement of policy, but we can also have an action plan that can be a moving and living document, so that we have that policy statement that includes our beliefs about how we want to proceed. And then we can, as you say, be very specific in that document. And if it's not part of the policy, that's something that can be changed it wouldn't require board action. It would just be something that would be necessary, and it would just allow things to move forward and change as necessary, as things always will. So, that's a good point, to have that action plan included. So if we do this, and I'm just trying to visualize it, as you said, Julie, we probably would be on the board writing these things down. How does that work virtually? Does everybody do their own chart, or do we just chime in on a single chart, or how should we go about gathering that information so that we can have something together for our next meeting?
We could put it into one chart.
In a Google Doc, we can all add to the same document.
Yep.
My suggestion would be the document itself would be in the folder, but what we can do is share the link to that right in the email. Makes it easier for everybody to find it. You can just click on the link and get right into the document. You don't have to go into the folder. I mean, it will be archived in the folder and accessible through the folder, but my suggestion, especially because we have some people who aren't here tonight, it'd be easiest just to throw it in and everyone can just click on the link. And then what I'll just do is I'll forward it to Keenan, and then that way she'll be able to get in through that way.
Okay.
If we want to do it that way, but that would work.
And
Yeah.
maybe have a goal for next meeting, taking all that input and maybe writing a definition, kind of like just even if it's more of a blanket definition and then kind of fine tune. Does that seem realistic for what we would want to generate from that list, or more discussion on the list? Just
Oh, no.
curious.
Yeah, I think that definitely a draft would be very possible if everybody gets information, fills that out, and we take a look at what we have. I think it would be easy to start drafting a statement.
I think we may need to have some discussion, depending on, there could be some entries that are kind of on two different ends, or maybe we'll all be in the middle. So it'll be interesting to see, but I think it will be a great way to consolidate our understanding so far and then have some discussion. And if we'll be able to, might need to clarify some entries and then be able to start using that to draft our work.
We're going to need to see what everybody's inputting. I think we're almost jumping the gun there because it's like, we got to see, what are you putting in? What are you putting in? Once we see everybody else's thoughts, my thought is, as we look at that, we're going to find that harmony amongst those ideas and those concepts and be able to then take that definition and truly make it Salem. That's how I see it. It's that process. Got to put the ideas out there first, play with them, tweak them around. I think that will lead us to where we need to go.
Right, because we're going to kind of look at it and say, look at this is our general, here's our general perceptions of equity.
Right.
When we start to apply it to Salem in our community, is that still the same, or does it change, or does it need to be tweaked, or, then kind of, as David said, kind of narrowing that lens and taking it, and it very well may be like, yep, this still applies, or maybe, hey, we need to kind of maybe define some things to be more specific to the school community or not. It'll be interesting to see. But I think it is a great next step to capture everything in one place.
And we all have access to it. So I think that's going to be a lot easier.
I don't think we can really move on to other things. I know we had some initial discussions about maybe some surveys to get baseline data, but that will really inform more the action plan than the definition. Once we have our definition and draft the policy and the supports, then we could work on an action plan. That I think then we work on a survey, and then that will inform our overall action plan, maybe some areas of focus.
So I quick whipped this up. This was basic thoughts. What are your ideas?
Yeah, I really like it, Dr. Glover. I'm big into the education piece of this. Sorry, you're gonna hear the knocking of my heater in the background. I gotta love a boiler heat. But I really like the defining what it is and isn't, and even because some of this is brand new in a lot of people's minds. I like the education piece. I like taking one step further from just the policy and definition, but really educating. What does it look like? What doesn't it look like? And using part of this document as being an education opportunity for people to learn even just a little bit more about equity. I mean, sometimes you can get it down to a definition without, but I'm the big piece of the educating a little bit too. maybe putting what it is and isn't as part of the document, just so that it's easier to identify values that we want to support. I don't know. I'm bigger, and some people want a smaller document, and I get that, like fine tuning it, but also not having it so small since it's new. It's not new, but it is new, if that makes sense.
Any other thoughts?
I think that that's a good way to start capturing people's thoughts so that we can start to have that, conversation to see, how one person's thoughts overlay over another. But is Dr. Glover, would you be willing to get that in, or is there somebody else who willing to get it, the link, and we can email it out to, there is an email block for the equity committee. It was created, so we do, that is in the email. So we could get that out to everybody.
Yep.
And if you send it out, it'll go to Keenan from your address. So that'll help too.
Okay.
She gets it from Salem CSD, so that'll work.
Okay. Now, Anne, when you get things from a Google Doc, do you see them on your computer, or do I need to send you a link?
Usually if I'm looking at a Google Doc, it's from a link,
Okay.
because I store my, anything that I create is stored on my cloud, and then it allows me to access it a couple of different ways. But something coming from the Google Drive, it behaves a little differently. I can't access it all the time. I think there's something I can download that will allow it to happen, but I need just a little technical assistance with that one.
Okay, so what I did is I just went through, and anyone who has the link can open this. And I'm just going to send it out in a normal email. What do you think, Julie? Will that work all right?
Yeah, I think so. I'm not sure. Do we have Keenan in the equity committee group?
I gave her name to Gina when I gave her the
Okay,
list of members.
perfect.
So, and I did explain to her that I was having issues with that, and she was going to talk to Sean or whoever was going to set it up.
Right, okay, perfect. And so Keenan, if you don't get it for some reason, just send me an email. But Dr. Glover, it sounds like he's sending it out pretty soon. So if you don't have it tonight, then send me an email and either he or I will send it over to you directly. Little workaround, those student emails. Yeah, that'll be good. I think sending it by a link too, because then it kind of explains to everyone who's not here kind of what our next step is.
Created in real time, that's good.
In the meantime, I think one of the plans was that we were going to work to kind of look at some other survey options, which I think would be helpful for when we're ready to start talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Dr. Glover, in the folder, I can't see it, but apparently I checked with him and he said he added resources for
Okay.
additional
Surveys.
the climate survey.
We'll
And
put them all in a folder.
Yep. There's surveys in there, and all those links I have in a doc. Oh, hi, Keenan. I can see you now. I have all those documents in a Google Doc. So they're all on one linkable page, and I figure if we just had more links, we could just keep adding to that document.
Perfect. Okay. So that'll just give us some foundation for when we get to the point where we're ready to start talking about that again.
Dr. Glover, included in that, did you add the information about the climate survey that was previously given a couple of years ago? Did you include the link for that? It's not an equity so much as
It's in a folder. We have the reports, so we can
Right.
put those right in the folder so we could see those.
Okay.
There are the full-blown 142-page reports, and then there's the shorter, I think it's like a 40-page presentation.
Summary.
For each like elementaries and secondary,
Right.
it's all in there.
No, but I mean, I don't know as far as whether there's been any changes or just additional
Oh.
information about the company that's, just to see if what's,
Yeah, I did go through and include links about the company who did that survey, as well as some of those other survey companies that are in there too. So all those links should be in there.
so. And that one, that was strictly climate. Do you feel that and I do think that you could extrapolate some of the information as it would relate to some of the equity issues from that, but some of the others are specific to equity. Do you think that would make a difference as the different surveys? Or that it really just is a climate survey?
I think if we're going to pick someone else's tools, there's always going to be parts where we're like really happy with parts of it, and then not so happy with other parts of it. There are ways to get exactly what we want. There's companies out there that we can reach out to. I'm thinking of K-12 education, where we can reach out to them and talk about the type of survey we are doing, and they will help in developing that survey. And I think they'll even help with distribution. They'll certainly help with analysis and conversation about what the data means. So if you're looking at something wanting to get exactly what we want, you're probably going to want to look that route, because anything else is going to leave some type of hole or not exactly hit it the way we wanted to hit it, or leave or miss something or overemphasize something. And so just something for food for thought.
Just one thing to think about, I think we could look at more equity specific versus the climate. The only thought I have is at the secondary level, some of those climate aspects don't seem necessarily to be related, but end up being related in terms of bullying or feeling safe, and safety aspects kind of sometimes go back to that acceptance piece. So there might be value to not totally excluding those. I don't know if that makes sense. I understand what you're saying, and I think some of them are very heavy into other aspects as opposed to the equity pieces. So maybe something with more of a balance. But I think especially at the secondary level, sometimes safety, the bullying, and some of those social pieces end up kind of coming around to equity issues, but maybe they don't really answer all of those questions. So I think I'd like to see some of that. I haven't seen equity specific, and maybe they do focus on some of that. So I think we should look at it all personally.
Yeah, if you Google them, you get a variety of them, and there's either some of them provide all of the questions, or some of them that sometimes it's just samples of the questions, but some of them are identified as climate, some of them are identified as equity. So I don't know if it's just because the market, if people are looking for, an equity survey, then, that might make them more marketable, or, it could be just a way to get themselves out there, or whether they really are measuring something different. So I just didn't know if anybody had any thoughts or experiences.
Dr. Glover, you probably would know more than I would, but I feel like even the survey business is similar to any of the other things that we buy. Sometimes you only see a small sample on a website, but sometimes you can, get a little better understanding if you kind of go out there and talk to a rep, and sometimes you can get a bigger sampling of questions. Maybe you don't get the whole survey, but we might be able to reach out if we're intrigued by somebody and get more detail.
Yeah, they hide questions on purpose. Part of that is a money thing, but the other part is also test integrity. and that if you know the questions in advance, it impacts how you're going to answer those questions.
Yeah.
And so it has something to do about reliability and about test reliability as well. So, again, part of it is we don't want to give you our test so you can use our questions for your own survey. We want you to buy our product. The other part is statistics.
Right. We don't want to teach to the test in a way. We don't want to try to skew the results.
That's right. Write your own questions.
But we could get a better sense, or at least talk to them what we're getting at, and they can say, yes, we get into this area, or no, we don't. Correct. We could then say, listen, how we want a little less safety, or do you get more into specific equity scenarios?
Yeah, I like something that has a balance of both. Like they said, there might be equity. I've also thought, and maybe this is so outside of the box, but can you do like a general question to the school? Like a lot of times in the classrooms remotely, they have to answer a question for the day to do attendance. Could you do a question like, what do you feel equity is to our general student body? Can you put a big piece of butcher paper up like what we would do to divide equity is and equity isn't, and put it out in the hallway on a wall and say, what do you think are characteristics of equity versus not, and kind of get some insight from the kids? Is that something that would work, or is that something where kids are just going to write whatever they want to on the wall and it wouldn't be successful, or wouldn't answer the question truthfully, or even know how to approach the question? I was just wondering some student feedback, what maybe Keenan would think, or what you guys would think about that.
As a high school student, I like the idea of teaching kids about equity, but I think at this point they don't have any background knowledge on it. Most people, at least. I can't speak for everyone. So if we did put up a poster like that, I'm not sure anyone would even write anything on it because they wouldn't know what to write. But I don't know.
So maybe it's something for down the road. Kind of once we work on this, and as we're putting some of our action plans in place, then maybe down the road it could be something that we put into action. I think just to kind of measure, kind of as an assessment of sorts of, is our message or kind of our work, how is it being received outside of the survey, in terms of their understanding as well.
I feel exactly like Keenan, because when I was listening to those interviews, the ones that the other group listened to last time, if I found that very interesting. That was one piece that the one man, I can't remember who he was, but he incorporated pre-K equity discussions all the way up through, so that the kids would know what words to use. It would be new language and new vocabulary that even pre-K and kindergarten would understand and be familiar with, so that that education plan would start as little all the way up through, and kind of making it part of the curriculum. And that's kind of, Keenan addressed that, is a lot of the kids don't even know how to even start these discussions because they've never been given the language or been given the tools to even discuss this area. So that was one of those things that you would put into plan as like something that we would want to put into curriculum. But I think that's a good thing down the road, and that way these discussions are more natural and they come freer because it's already been discussed even in our youth, versus trying to discuss that now where we don't even know the words, or we don't even know the language almost in some areas, to be able to discuss these issues deeper, if that makes sense.
So I do think it is something that as we move forward, we will want to have some way to measure take the temperature of how things are going in the district, and not just with equity, but an overall picture. So I do think it's something that we need to keep on our plate and keep considering our options. I know that some of them, if you look them online, it's not a high cost. Some of them do have costs involved. So we just need to, plan ahead to make sure that we have the resources to do something like that. And, how often we would do it. And we also have to decide, I don't know as if we need to do it every year. I don't know what the recommended period of time is between instruments. The Council for Prevention, they did it every 2 years. Have they done another one in Salem School since? Are they still doing them? Or they just haven't?
I haven't heard anything from the county recently. They were actually, it would have been scheduled to be December.
Yeah.
But I don't know if this COVID thing has put everything on kind of on halt. Julie, have you heard anything at all?
I haven't. I was just thinking about, generally what time of the year. And obviously, I think they would probably have a little, so if it was every other year, it was the school year before I came in. So yeah, it would be this school year at some point. We could reach out to them and ask them.
I remember doing it in December because we had to get out of the gymnasium for 3 days because we were fixing the middle door and needed to get it done before basketball season got serious. And so we moved everyone to the computer lab, and they did that survey for those days.
Yeah, I can touch base, we could touch base with them and see what they're thinking. It may be on hold because of COVID. I think the biggest barrier is that we have a fair percentage of fully remote students. There's probably a couple of ways we could go in terms of testing students, but I'm not sure I would want to get the most students tested. I don't know if that could be their issue, but we could certainly talk to them about it. We still have some time. I think it just pushes back a little bit when they release the data. So I don't even know if the woman's the same. Do you? Is it the same rep?
I think Catherine's still there. I don't think she's moved, or at least I haven't heard.
Okay.
But they may be holding off on another year intentionally to try to keep that year increment into place. But like I said, I just haven't heard.
I think also really some of what they measured in terms of substance use, there is a big focus on that, but some of the other things they measure are going to be quite skewed because it's not a fully school environment. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they have to say about that. They're not full time in school. And some of those other things I think might be difficult to measure, but we could find out.
Yeah, they did, you mentioned the safety issues in there. That was a lot of the feedback that we got and considered in the last, round of looking at the data. So just made me, I know they did it every 2 years, but I don't know what other instruments, what they recommend. So for the next meeting, if people could get that form filled out, we can start to generate we can start to compile that. Is there anybody who would be interested in looking at that prior to the meeting to kind of put things, start to gather that, or is that something that we should do as a group?
I'm more than willing to go through it. Maybe try and compile, some concepts out of it. So like Dr. Glover had mentioned, those common threads. But I think it's going to be something that when we're together, will definitely, I think, fall into place a little bit easier. But yeah, I have no problem going through it before we meet.
One thing I'm just thinking about as we're just having this final discussion. So, and I don't know if we would want to clarify this in the document for those that are here tonight. So I'm just thinking if there's a common, maybe there's something. So I think most of us have kind of gotten to the point that equity is not equality. So if Keenan went right in and wrote that down first, if I support that, would I put a plus sign? There might be a way, or do I rewrite that so it's in there 17 times? I'm just wondering, how do we capture if someone else is saying, yes, I was going to write that, maybe you put a little plus sign next to it or something.
Put your
To
initials.
reinforce that.
Just put your initials next to it.
I would actually recommend the opposite. And if someone wants to put, says that equity is not equality and they want to write it 14 times, to let them do that.
I just think we want to be clear to do that, though, so that.
Well, you have the link to the document. Go ahead and change it, add that into the directions if you'd like. And the reason I say that is that the texture, we're going to be able to do some textual analysis on this just through the simple use of what word has in it. Just if nothing more in a word count, like how many times does equality show up? Where does it show up? And we're going to be able to do those things if everyone who says equity versus, the hash marks and that some other work there. There's also a couple of, if I remember correctly, a couple programs out there where you can take documents, toss them into this program, and it will spit out some basic textual analysis. To let you see, so you can see where those main themes are, and some of them do it graphically. You've probably seen it in classrooms, things like Wordle or those types of things. For the group for next time, for an easier analysis. It's kind of quick and dirty, but it at least gives you kind of a first blush idea. So I've sent everyone the link already. It's already out. You have the chart.
So if we just say, if it's important to you, don't be afraid to write it again, repeat,
That was my input, is like, just put down anything that you feel, because really we're using each other's language too. And because we're coming from so many different angles into this, it's kind of refreshing to hear how you say it versus how I would say it versus how someone else would say it. That diversity piece only strengthens the document by hearing. We might even hear the same statement 8 different times, but wow, some of that language in that might, it would also help us build the definition with the language we use in that document as well.
Dr. Glover, I received the link and I opened it up and I can view the document, but I can't type in it. I'd have to send a request for edit access. I don't know if I should just. Yeah.
Can someone else just take a look at the link quick and see if you're in the same boat, please? And I just did send another email out on that just to basically use the end words and said.
Mine's doing the same.
I just thought I was talking to myself. Just saying that, write what you feel. Put it in there. The more topic shows up, the more important it'll be.
Mm-hmm.
I think you might just have to change when you go into the link, and anyone with the link can edit, maybe.
And I thought I'd sent it that way. Keenan, go ahead and request the permission to do that.
This says anyone on the internet with this link can view. So I think you got to change it to anyone with this link can edit.
Must be I missed the save button. All right, I'll get that fixed.
I mean, we could all request the edit access too. I mean, either way, but anyway, you don't have to go in.
Okay, Keenan, close and open again. Let's see what you get. Should be okay this time.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, it's working now.
Awesome.
it's working for me too. Thanks, Dr. Glover.
No problem. There's 2 buttons I had to push. I got one. I didn't get the other one. We got it now.
All right.
So at
Thanks,
this
guys.
point, yeah, I think we,
Yeah.
oh, I'm sorry, Julie, go ahead.
I'm really happy with where this is going. I was just saying, I like this direction. I think it's nice how we've been able to come to this point.
No, I think it's a very productive way to keep the conversation going. So that's great. So I appreciate the people who came, and Dr. Glover, thank you for getting that out to the people who were unable to join us tonight. But hopefully we'll get
Yep.
everybody's response and be able to take a look at those responses next month. Is there anything else that anybody would like to see on the agenda for our next meeting? I think we can probably spend quite a bit of time with that definition and taking a look at the language that we would choose to use. So I think an hour would probably be
Yeah.
pushing it to add anything else. But if there's anything that anybody would like to add to the agendas, please just chime in, and we can get them, get them on the docket to talk about. So. Well, thank you very much for everybody, and enjoy the rest of your evening. And I look forward to making my brain work on the equity chart. So thank you very much, and everybody have a good week.
All right. You too.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. It's been great.